You. So today I learned that 60% of the nation's guns are primarily owned by 3% of its population. That mostly 95% of Americans believe that background checks are a good idea, and that 60% of Americans believe that guns are too easily accessible. One of the arguments that you will hear people make is we can't infringe on the good gun owners' rights for the actions of a few. But you didn't have a problem doing that with stop and frisk. Stop and frisk, out of the 1 million stops made, only 4,000 ended up in arrest. So you harassed the good, you subjugated the many for the few. You didn't have a problem doing that at all. You don't have a problem when somebody walks into a grocery store and tries to buy Sudafed, or a drugstore and tries to buy Sudafed. They can only get 2 packages of Sudafed, or they're met with suspicion because you believe that there are a few people who are going to use these to make drugs. I bet you most of the people who are buying them probably have codes. You have a problem there. You don't have a problem banning entire regions of the world because of the actions of a few. So miss me with the argument that you don't want the few making the many uncomfortable. Because it happens all the time when it suits your purposes. And stop telling me you want to use these guns to make sure that the government doesn't overreach. If you wanted to make sure a government didn't overreach, you wouldn't allow them to have gerrymandered districts. And you wouldn't allow them you would make them have term limits. And you wouldn't allow them to break promise after promise after promise. If you cared about a government you didn't trust, you would involve yourself more in putting people that you did trust in office. Our offices, primarily politically, are decided by the most people who don't vote than who do. More people don't vote than do. If you want a reasonable answer to making sure a government is in line with your wishes and actions, put people in place that do that instead of sitting at home or not doing anything at all. You don't trust the government? Nobody, no group of people in this country have less reason to trust the United States government than black people. But we don't take up arms against the government. You don't hear us going, oh, well, the government's going to, and the government has actively done things to us. You want reasons to have guns. You don't want a better government. If you did, you wouldn't act like that. If you did, you wouldn't mitigate people's right to vote. If you did, you wouldn't care about the electoral college. You would make it a general vote so that everybody could be included. You want what you want, and you use these paper-thin excuses to have them. It is better to make sure that somebody can't have term limits, or to make sure that somebody can't gerrymander districts, and a congressman, whether you like him or not, gets to keep his office. It is better to make sure that they have term limits than to have somebody that you don't like or trust keep an office. It is better to hold our political representatives responsible than to have people that you don't trust in office. You don't want to do that. You want guns to keep them in check. It's easier to vote than to get a bunch of people AR-15s in people's hands that we don't even know. Your remedy is that you want to keep the government in check by threats of violence. Why don't you keep this government in check by threats of responsibility? All right, that's a little note from the GED section. We got the Jazz Report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.